Day 580 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a quick look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 276,000 military personnel losses, which includes an additional 400 for the day. Then as for hardware losses, 5 tanks, 19 APVs, and an incredibly whopping 39 artillery of various kinds. And as an example, these artillery pieces or platforms can range from small-towed howitzers like the D-20s to the massive self-propelled guns, the Giant Bs on tracked wheels, and anything in between. Then we'll head back across to the map today, start out in Russia, as more explosions were reported in Kursk, with the Russian MOD reporting 2 drones as being shot down. Of course, this comes off the back of just yesterday when a Russian FSB building was successfully hit in this region. Also, we're aware of one Ukrainian drone that was neutralized, possibly with electronic warfare techniques, near to or at the Kalino airfield, where a Russian commander with his deputy and another officer inspected the failing Ukrainian drone, only to have it literally blow up or ignite itself in their faces, causing some wounds in the process. Then moving across far, far away into the east of Russia, there's been multiple reports now of hostile armed bandits taking over the Dulizma oil production facility in Irkutsk. Although these guys, 400 in size, were then forced out by an even bigger militia group in what appears to be mass lawlessness, as private groups run to overtake state assets. And it's really hard to confirm exactly what on earth is going on in some of these far and away regions of Russia right now. But it could also be Russian oligarchs and their very own private military companies designed to protect their assets, which makes a lot of sense, as a few months back there was a lot of talk about Russian oligarchs creating their own Wagner-style PMCs and recruiting Russians for the job. And likely because they had the foresight to see the direction the country was headed in. And this is the second such story in just a week of the lawlessness and bandits in Russia. So I think we're going to see a lot more of this to come. Then back into the Ukrainian map, move all the way across, as overnight, Ukrainian air defenses shot down 26 out of 38 Shahed drones, mostly in the Odessa, Mykolaiv, and Sumy regions. And as for Odessa, some grain infrastructure, including some trucks, were hit, as Russia purely seeks to save face upon recently exiting the Safe Passage grain deal, thereby choosing to specifically target the grain infrastructure in what is clearly a show of Russia's undissolvable ego, as they continue to seek to force their decision of leaving said grain deal. And I can never but help to think that Russia has much bigger fish to fry than this stuff, militarily speaking. Also, here's a nice map I think you guys will like, which reportedly is showing the route that the Russian drones took overnight as they entered from the south on their way to Odessa, as they mostly attempt to bypass Ukrainian air defenses, weaseling their way through, largely avoiding any cities on their path or capitals where the biggest concentration of Ukrainian air defenses exist. And this is exactly why support for more air defense systems to Ukraine needs to continue. Then we'll head over to the Donbas, as satellite images show the scale of destruction after an ammunition warehouse was hit in Krasnodon. But we can also see from another angle for what feels like some Oppenheimer-level explosions. And more than that, the sheer distance from the front line makes for a location that Ukraine could only have dreamed of reaching just this time last year. Thus, taking out massive ammo dumps way behind enemy lines is just the new harsh reality and debilitating reality that Russia has to deal with now. Then, just south of Bakhmut, so after securing the area west of the railway tracks, the AFU have since shifted attention towards Kurdy and preliminary information suggests that the push has already begun. Then, as for Bakhmut itself, well, wickedly emotionless or expressionless Ukrainian spy chief Bordanov has stated that 15,000 of Russia's reserve army have been pinned down at this location, but also flat out stating that they will be destroyed as well. And indeed, they are pinned down in this region because the substantial Russian units positioned here can't go anywhere, as Putin cannot risk the fall of Bakhmut. It's just too devastating politically for him. But he's going to feel that wrath either way at some point sooner or later. Then heading down the map, so Russian forces attempted and failed at new assault operations in Avdiivka and Marinka, as they appear to have decided to fire up at these locations once again and really attempt to give it a red hot go once more. Oh, by the way, locations both of which have largely remained unchanged in terms of Russian advancements since the true beginnings of the Russo-Ukrainian War, which actually began back in 2014. So these types of regions are just one large or two large veritable graveyards of Russian artillery, Russian light and heavy armor, and of course Russian military personnel. Then we'll head across to the southern axis today as the AFU armored vehicles continue to operate behind enemy lines. And by that I specifically mean the recently penetrated Surovikin line of the Russian forces just west of the town of Verbova. Then as for Novoprokopivka, now it was only in the last few days that the northern outskirts, I might zoom in there, of the town were pushed into the grey zone from the previously Russian-controlled red zone. In fact, some Russian forces tried very hard to recapture some northern town positions here without success. And in one such instance, a Ukrainian Stugna P anti-tank missile had a heartwarming surprise for them. With this Russian infantry fighting vehicle, which by the way, if you look closely, you'll see was overcrowded with multiple soldiers on top, didn't quite make it to see another day. Is it okay if I almost feel sorry for them? Then heading on down south, so explosions reported near to Sevastopol again, with occupational authorities claiming air defenses working against the aerial target threats. And if you're just waking up most mornings wondering if Ukraine has targeted more Russian military sites in occupied Crimea, well, chances are it's more likely than not, as I don't think there's been a single day that's gone by in the last week, let's say the last 7 days, where Ukraine hasn't kept the pressure on Crimean targets. All of which is likely forcing Russia into a reactive posture whilst demonstrating that Ukraine's military can undermine the Kremlin's symbolic and strategic power projection from its warm water ports in occupied Sevastopol. Then we'll head across to some news for today, and we'll start out with some Ukrainian hardware news updates. So, Ukraine is continuing to innovate in the battle space with drones, this time in the form of miniature anti-tank mine rollers. And although this device clearly doesn't have the weight of around 20 to 30 metric tons required to trigger your average Soviet anti-tank mine, I suspect this prototype-looking device has a data gathering function, where it may later on be used to detect the mines and alert the sappers of their existence instead. Then in some other hardware news, Ukraine is testing a new naval drone which looks like a small torpedo. And I've mentioned about this specific naval drone once before, the Marichka, but at the time we only had an artist's mock-up impression of the device. which means it's great to see that it's now manifested into reality with some testing going on. And some might say, hey, this is just a torpedo with extra steps, but that's actually not the case, as the range or travel distance of even the longest range torpedoes pales in comparison to what this platform can achieve. Also, these types of naval drones can perform surveillance and reconnaissance, can adapt to changing conditions, and can even loiter, lying in wait for extended periods of time. Just terrifying. Then in some other news, the mayor of Lviv in western Ukraine has announced that the oblast's energy grid is fortified and much better prepared this coming season against likely Russian attacks in the winter once again. But it does continue to beg the question, is Russia's energy grid even prepared for this winter? I don't believe so. And I've asked this question before because is Russia even thinking anything along these lines, that their attacks on Ukrainian energy grid infrastructure this coming winter will likely have an instant karmic return for them? That's just the reality. Or, instead, are they going to take the classic Russian reactive approach and chuck an absolute tantrum when their cities are likely blacked out as a direct result of a retaliatory response to their actions in Ukraine? And Moscow's overnight temperatures, for instance, are already reaching as low as 7 degrees Celsius or about 44 degrees Fahrenheit. But honestly, they better not act blindsided when they get a direct taste of their own medicine, when their lights and heating probably goes out during this winter as well. Of course, you may remember the entire free world came to Ukraine's aid last winter, donating countless tens or even hundreds of thousands of generators of all shapes and sizes to keep Ukrainian citizens warm and protected during the winter. Not to mention all of the donated influxes of repair and replacement infrastructure parts for their electricity grids. Although it's clear to expect that Russia is not going to get that same global treatment whatsoever. Then in another Russian military mobilization blunder segment, so I'll say firstly that in these blunders we've noticed how the Russian mobilized have just not been getting paid most of the time. They're sent to Ukraine to defend the lines, then die, then many times get listed as deserted or missing in action. Just utterly disgusting treatment. And in a similar vein, there was a Business Insider story recently reporting on how unpaid Russian officers became like unpaid disgruntled workers and sold some key intel on the Russian Black Sea Fleet. Among its various aspects, of which one such event reportedly led to the BSF HQ, or the Black Sea Fleet HQ, being destroyed just last weekend. So just yet another example of why you cannot treat your own so poorly. It serves your better interests. Well, you can treat them poorly like Russia does, but it only lasts so long. Then we'll head across to a couple of funnies to round it all off for today, guys. So the animals have chosen their side once again. This time, an angry walrus attacked a Russian naval expedition landing boat in the Arctic not long after causing the sinking of the boat. And the internet really likes seeing these types of stories. Then, as for a final funny, so some Finnish archive footage of a young Tsar Putin was just uploaded to the internet from what appears to be the early mid-90s. And yes, I realize all of our clothes were a little bit baggier in the 90s to say the least, but I think I can still justifiably say that Putin's appearance was especially ratty with his sports vest and pants and his overgrown hair, as he ate dinner and joined in a game of table tennis. Oh, isn't that nice? And all of which totally makes sense now more than ever, as his nickname back in those days amongst his contemporaries was Little Rat or Puny Rat, with him really living up to his name in this one. So that's it for today, guys. I wasn't actually going to do a video today, but I did find some time, and since I've just noticed you guys have been awesomely more and more supportive as time goes by, so I just felt like I couldn't let you guys down. So thanks again for all the support. Please continue to like and comment, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.